You're listening to Art Affairs, episode number 16. Today I'll be talking to Brian Mashburn. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. If this is your first time listening, Art Affairs is meant to give you a look at and into the new contemporary art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, shining a spotlight on the human side of the wonderful work they do. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, and you can check out new episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to subscribe. And you can always connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. On Twitter, it's at art_affairs. All right, so today's guest is artist Brian Mashburn. I've been following Brian's work for several years now, and I actually think it was probably a ThinkSpace show that originally introduced me to it. But over the years, Brian has established quite an impressive and extremely cohesive body of work. His style is immediately recognizable and is this amalgamation of both Eastern and Western aesthetics, which is partly due to his rich multicultural heritage. We talk about that on the show, and we also talk about how he first got started in his career, his upcoming solo show at a Bend gallery, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Brian Mashburn. Brian, welcome to the show, man. It's really good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
All right, so you have a very interesting background that I didn't know much about until I started researching you for the show. So I want to spend a little bit of time on that because I think it's really fascinating.
Sure.
Your father grew up in North Carolina, which is, the part of the world that you still live today. But your mother grew up in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And not only that, but she grew up in Hong Kong after her mother fled mainland China just before Mao closed the borders, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And so worlds apart as far as life experiences between your mother and her father. The father grew up in a town of 3,000 people. Your mother grew up in one of the most densely populated, overly industrialized, urban environments in the world. Wonders what circumstances led to them actually finding each other and building a family.
I know, right? It's their story's a lot more interesting than mine, for sure. but yeah, a lot of it's strange having, the maternal side of my family being like that because a lot of it we don't know. We have, I've never met my mom's dad, or maybe I have one vague memory when I was really young of meeting my maternal grandfather. And, my mom didn't really know him. It was kind of just things are different. Culturally, it's just different. But yeah, so I'm trying to think where to even start here. My grandmother, lived in mainland China. And so my mom was born in 49. 49's when Mao dropped the curtain, basically. And so basically, it was my grandmother is single mother of two girls in Hong Kong in the late 40s and 50s. And I just can't imagine that.
Right.
My mom realized, in the last 5 years that her sister was only her half sister. And so my aunt, her sister, who, just our whole life, we just figured same mother and father, but, I don't think that was the case. And then, and even still, their father or my mom's father, we had no relationship with whatsoever. So it's just a different dynamic over there. And then you also take into account the times.
Sure.
It's the 50s. Hong Kong's always been basically there's all the stuff going on now, and but that's not new. like it's, as long as Hong Kong's been a thing and as long as like opium has existed or whatever. But, well, cause that was, I guess the 100 Years' War with the UK that like kicked a lot of it off was basically opium. And I mean, it's still like nothing really changes, does it? But, I don't know. So, yeah, one thing after another, but yeah. So anyway, yeah, mom grew up in Hong Kong. So yeah, this gets back to it's family lore basically. So I don't know. I did a show at ThinkSpace a couple of years ago called Origin Stories, and it kind of talked about, where's the line between family lore and like truth and like what actually happened and, what gets passed down. And, but I like the idea of the oral tradition, and so we just kind of have these stories, and it's on both sides, mother and father's side. But yeah, my mother's side's a lot murkier. There's not a lot of like ancestry.com for people who got stuck with Mao in the 40s,
So how did they end up meeting then? How did they end up coming together?
So mom came to college in the States. She's very hard worker, smart lady, and like kind of typical tiger mom sort of situation. But she got into this boarding school in Macau, which is an island off Hong Kong. It's kind of like the Las Vegas of China, I guess. I think that's where all the casinos are. But there was a Catholic boarding school, girls boarding school, and the family lore is that my mom and her sister got dropped off there because my grandmother couldn't afford to send them to boarding school, but knew that these like nice white nuns wouldn't turn them away. And so they get in there and, mom did good in school, did well enough to, I believe she either got a job with like Nestle or somebody, or somehow she went to Pepperdine in LA. So, I don't know which came first, but she got to the States that way and came over for college. She knew like Elvis and the Beatles as far as like Western culture goes. So she's like, I'll go to LA. But, and then, so she came over, let's see, she was, I guess college age. So maybe whatever, 18, 19, something like that. And then, and so she met my dad there. My dad went to school at Pepperdine also. And, he had a bit of a meandering path to get there too. But yeah, they're very religious. My folks are, like most boomers in the South are, I guess. but the unlikelihood of all these things happening, it's absurd, really. It's amazing. Like stranger than fiction. And like my grandfather on my dad's side was a bombardier in World War II. And so have you there's a book, I can't even remember. I don't know. A book came out a few years ago about some of the bombardiers in World War II and just how, just what a ridiculous job that was, basically. And
you can only imagine, like, how stressful that was, the whole experience.
Well, and it's like the bombers, like, who were at Normandy and D-Day and that sort of stuff, was, if not the most dangerous job in the entire war. And it was like, you got, if you flew over 20 missions or something, you're most likely not coming home, that sort of thing. And so like somehow we figured out my grandfather flew like 33 or so missions. Wow. And he was like 19, or like what that does to a kid's psyche. And just, it's crazy. And you, like, it showed, like his family, my family, paid for that for years and in one way or another. And but basically it's like during that time when my grandmother is fleeing China, my grandfather's in the European theater, like bombing, but basically, the like the Sino-Japanese War, there were two of them. So it's like China and Japan were at war during that same time. So, that kind of morphed into World War II, but basically it's like both grandparents are on the other side of the world in this conflict. It's like a true world war. And I don't know. I guess that's a bit of a digression, but
well, no, but it's amazing how they ended up coming together. I mean, in the end, right?
yeah. So it's like their parents are over there with this like absurd, world event, and then they kind of loop back around and meet in Malibu, or no, it was in Pepperdine was in Compton then, or Watts. It was the Watts campus, but not quite as nice as Malibu, but.
And so they eventually made their way back to North Carolina, where they ultimately had you, right? So was that to be closer to like your dad's hometown, or what led them back to North Carolina?
So I had my dad's parents were in North Carolina. They lived at the beach south of Wilmington, North Carolina, and Dad went to school at UNCW out of high school, I guess, and there's some family lore there, but apparently didn't do so hot and had to go out to California. I don't know if he was fleeing his own demons or what, but his older brother was in LA, so he went out there, started school at Pepperdine, met my mom, and and so mom actually finished her degree in like 4-year degree in 2.5 years, no student debt, and like worked the whole time.
Holy cow.
And so she was like that. And so she finished, and her green card was up. She has student visa or whatever it is. And so basically went to my dad and was like, marry me or I'm going back to Hong Kong. And so dad's like, sure, this is great. And and so he didn't even finish school. He's just like, yeah, this is what I came for, and I'm good to go. But so yeah, they get married, stay, so she can stay in the States, and then made their way back across to North Carolina, and I think they moved to Virginia first, had my older brother, and then moved to Charlotte. So
okay, and you predominantly grew up in Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
And what is that area of the country like? Is it more rural, or is Charlotte more of a city or urban, or?
Well, Charlotte's a big city.
Okay.
It's real big now, but I was there. I grew up there in the 80s. So Charlotte was still the biggest city in North Carolina, and but it's grown since then.
Well, and as a kid, were you really close to nature? Did you have an opportunity to spend much time out in nature?
Well, yeah, we had, we lived in a neighborhood, and, we're kind of probably like lower middle class, working class neighborhood. But I remember there was like a creek behind the house, and like some, we just called them the woods or whatever. And, definitely spent a lot of time there, and, lots of ticks.
What kind of work did your parents do while you were growing up?
So dad, he's always been in the lumber industry. Spent a lot of time in like cabinet shops and around plywood and stuff. And, but he helped start a company, out in California actually. And it basically just like, I think it started where he would even like mill lumber and then drive it to job sites. And then it just him and I guess the guy who had the money basically developed it into a business that actually grew pretty big, and they distribute just plywood and hardware and hardwood and that sort of stuff. But and then mom worked in a bank. She was like an international banker at she hopped around, but at BB&T and Centura and that sort of stuff. But so like when I was young, it was definitely like always very blue collar household though. And like, even with the grandparents too, that we do know, like it was just, a lot, you work, that's what you do.
Well, and I read that you also spent a lot of time or some time in China as a kid. Was that to spend time with your mother's side of the family?
A little bit. Yeah. Well, and this was, I guess, after, was it 97 or 99 or whatever, when, so Hong Kong went back to Chinese rule technically. I should know this. It was 97 or 99. But anyway, my mom still had family there in Hong Kong. And then we probably have family in China too. I'm not sure. But she has some cousins in Hong Kong proper. And so before it went back to Chinese rule, we wanted to go before that just because nobody knew what would have happened. And
yeah.
So we went once just like family vacation. I was probably in high school then or something. So yeah, that was a shorter trip. And then after the transition, you know, not much changed. I know that's easy for me to say. I know a lot of people in Hong Kong would disagree, but you know, more or less like you could still go and visit people and life resembled what it did before. So we were able to go back a couple times here and there. And then when I left home, went to college, my folks actually moved there permanent or for, you know, they were there for probably 5 years. And yeah. And so I would go there during the summers and do sort of whatever I could to justify a trip to China and Hong Kong. So, you know, taught some like English as a second language sort of stuff. And, but yeah, I mean, it was an amazing opportunity to be able to go spend a little time and travel around. And, you know, I mean, you grow up in the South in the 80s being this like mixed race person, and, you know, your top priority is like trying to fit in. Like, I want to look like these other people. And, you know, the 80s wasn't a great time to be Asian American necessarily. Like, there was a little yellow scare and whatnot. And so, you know, my whole life, it was almost something to not like to be a little ashamed of, but not really, but just trying to like, how do you like, every summer my hair would turn a little bit brown and I would get excited because I'm like, oh, I look like these other people a little more. But so I don't know, like going there, spending a little time, especially like, you know, I was in my 20s or whatever, so it matured a tiny amount, but enough to like be able to be like, hey, this is part of me too, and you know, sort of embrace that side. And that's been probably, I don't know, it's been very consequential for my work and just everything.
And did that give you sort of a heightened appreciation for your cultural heritage and drop some of that, I guess, trying to fit in that you were dealing with?
I mean, maybe like, yeah, the appreciation was probably there. It was probably more just a realization that like the people that you're trying to, you know, assimilate with might be idiots or something, you know, or like these, like if somebody is going to judge you on something,
right,
you know, as ridiculous as this, then maybe they're not worth, you know, appeasing. But that's the powerful thing is like, you know, how do you learn how to not care so much what other people think about you, especially if it's, you know, just not really well-founded.
Yeah. I mean, that's a powerful thing at any age, but especially as a kid, you know, especially when you're growing up and you're very kind of vulnerable to that judgment and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotta, and you know, that being said, like I'm not like a victim. I'm not really like that different. There's a lot of people like me and a lot of people who are a lot worse off than me. Like, you know, I was very fortunate to, my childhood was great in a lot of ways. And I was very fortunate to have the family I had and, you know, people who cared, but, and a lot of folks unfortunately don't have that, but regardless, like it does do something. I guess everybody's got their sort of, origin story thing, but it's funny, you know, like I have an older brother, he's 2 years older than me. And that's sort of, this control, or, you know, like the control group or whatever. But he and I, like, we're so different, but we have these kind of unique things that like we're both kind of similarly driven and like to a detriment almost. And then, like neither of us like ketchup or mayonnaise or something. I don't know, just like little things that, you know, it's, yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know, I don't ever really talk to him about it, but like there are these things where it's like he had that same experience, like growing up in the South, like trying to convince people that like we're not actually Bruce Lee sort of thing. And, you know, and so like, what does that do? And like, what are the defense mechanisms we put in place at a young age to be like trying to convince people that, to like us or to let us fit in or whatever.
And from what I've read, it was time that you spent in like Chinese language class where you first became interested in painting, right?
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that experience. And did you enjoy that sort of like immersive cultural environment?
Probably not, but it was so like we would do these Saturday classes, and I mean that's another one of these like I don't know, like nobody when they're 8, 9, 10 years old wants to go to school on Saturday, like after you go to school all week, and so it was interesting because there is some level of like let's put you in these Chinese language classes and actually introduce you to more people who look more like you. So that was, being around other Asian kids or other, whatever, first, second generation immigrant children, was interesting. But then that was like when I kind of realized like, oh, the people who are like fully Chinese also look at me as weird because I'm only half. But anyway, so going to these classes and it is basically drawing, it's character-based language. So like it was all about gesture and, at its kind of purest form, it is a lot of Chinese characters are representational.
Right.
And, like I still remember like character for mountain or something looks like a mountain. And so basically we'd be in these classes where, you're copying characters hundreds of times over and over again. And gesture is important. And, Chinese calligraphy, there's a long tradition there. And, but at the same time, like, it's 1987. I live in Charlotte. Like, you're not going to learn Chinese. And, my mom spoke Cantonese being from Hong Kong, and like Mandarin is basically what we were learning and what you learn, or that's the main, the primary language in China. So even my mom couldn't help us a ton. So basically it turned into this exercise, and it's very similar to like any drawing exercise you would do. So it's like we were learning a language, but there was no way I was going to pick up Mandarin, at 8 years old. And so, but the idea of these sort of like abstractions as far as like, this is a symbol that means something, and there's some, I don't know, there's some expression there, even if I'm not actually learning what I'm supposed to be learning.
Right. Well, and had you already had an interest in art like before that, or was this what really sparked your interest?
No, I mean, I've always drawn and been interested in, I don't know, I think, I've always been interested in images, and my mom is a good artist. She, I remember her showing me how to draw things here and there, and she had a few sculptures that she had made back in the day. But I don't know, I think it was like one of those, I remember like having like National Geographics and being like, looking at the pictures is so much more fun than reading the words. and like have like this memory of being like, I can just like look at this picture of this guy climbing this mountain and like, and that's enough. Like I can make my own stories out of it or whatever. But yeah, so I've always had that interest. I've always liked to draw. And so those classes, there's probably some bit of like putting two and two together.
So you ultimately went, when it came time to go to college, you went to University of North Carolina, right? The Tar Heels, which is what, a couple hours northeast of Charlotte. Why UNC? Like what led you there?
Well, I mean, in North Carolina, it's like it was the basketball team I liked pretty much. You're like I don't know. It's a great school for one. And for like a public school, it's well, especially in 1998 or whatever, it was a very, very good deal. Like Chapel Hill's a great school. It was cheap. It was close to home. Like it did make sense. And like I made like good enough grades to get in. So it was one of those things. Like if I got in, that's where you go. Did
they have a good arts program?
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know. Probably, but it's I'm sure the program's considered to be decent, but it was very conceptual.
Mm.
Like I went there as this kid, like, I mean, I was super ignorant to the art world and, still am largely, but like, I went there with like the idea of, an artist is this specific thing, that, or it's a like, set of skills that you have and, you can draw, paint, whatever. And so I get to Chapel Hill and it's like, if you are a good drafts person, that's basically a bad thing, and it was just very like avant-garde, conceptual driven. It needs to be about gender or race or something. And at the time it was I don't know, frustrating or something, but in hindsight it's like, I needed that, and it was enlightening, I guess, in a way. And I don't know, because like you can learn how to draw and you can practice anywhere. So like to be in a context where you're expanding your horizons, that's more valuable, really, in the long run.
And what was your focus?
Well, so I did painting and drawing, and then basically did the same amount of photography too, though. But technically the focus was 2D design, painting, drawing, and so we did all, like, there were all the classes where you're doing, like, I've drawn live models for too many hours in my life and like still lives and anatomy and all that stuff. Like they had that. It was just elective, basically. And, like, you didn't have to, but like I liked that side of things for sure. The photography too, like I've always had a big interest in photography, and that was kind of like in 1998, photography was still dark rooms, and it looked completely different, and it was still more of like in my mind it's like, if all else fails, I can go shoot 35 millimeter for a newspaper. None of these things exist anymore, but like I don't know, it's but it seemed like a somewhat marketable skill, at least, to be able to set up a dark room and do that sort of stuff. But yeah, not so much, really. And,
So you graduated in 2002 with the BFA, and it sounded like that it was overall a good experience for you, even though it may have like clashed a little bit with what you wanted to do. It still felt like it helped you think in ways that you may have not been able to think before.
Yeah, well, the clash is good, like it's good to be challenged like that. Like you go to learn. Like I didn't know anything going in. So like, I'm not going to think that my preconceived notions of, what art should be or what art making is about is right. Like I should go in thinking like, I don't know what I'm doing. I still think that, but it's, but one thing that, I still think about a lot, and probably one of the things that I took from it was, it wasn't just the conceptual work or like making art about things that personally didn't interest me so much, but it was like the other classes I did take. So I took a lot of physics, and I took a lot of, just psych and sociology and all your sort of, liberal arts, whatever education. But like all of that stuff informed my work more than the art classes did. And like, I remember kind of having that realization, it's in like some anthropology class, they're talking about whatever you talk about in anthropology classes, and being like, this is relevant to my work I'm doing in the studio. And like, and I don't know, just the sort of interdisciplinary nature of art. And like, here's this thing that allows you to interact with the world around you. You can be curious. You can, whatever strikes you, whatever you want to research or learn about, like art can be that medium. And that was just an amazing revelation. And like, I still do it, it's still this, what I do every day is like, what are the things that either I want to learn about or that are frustrating me or that I think need to have some sort of spotlight on them, like that, like I can do that, I can, I mean, I don't know how well it translates, but just for my own personal curiosity can be satisfied.
Yeah, well, it's great that you were able to come to that realization in school that like these extra classes that may have, to somebody else may have been seen as a burden or something that you had to do, you sort of embraced them as an opportunity to become more well-rounded and incorporate those things into your art.
Well, that, and it's like, you got to make art about something. And like I don't know, nobody's personal experience is that interesting to them, because it's all And, I'm in this college where there's what I kind of thought was this obsessive sort of like, gender issues, racial issues. And I mean, in a lot of like kind of postmodern art is so wrapped up in identity and these sorts of things. And like, here I am, this like mixed race kid from this family that has all these pertinent qualities to identity and race. And it just didn't even register that like, I could make this about me.
So fresh out of college, a twinkle in your eye, did you have any idea like what you wanted to do with your career at that point? Or is that something that you were still had to figure out?
I think I'm still figuring that out. But, yeah, no, I mean, I was, the girl I was dating at the time, her father had passed away when we were in college, and he had halfway built a house at the beach when he had passed away. So it was like, well, let's go to the beach, finish this house. And that didn't work out. So it was like, well, I know some people in Asheville. I load up the car and go hang out there for a couple of weeks. And that was like 18 years ago. So, yeah.
So as far as like the art that you were creating at that time, just out of college, had you really found the artistic voice at that point that you have today? And were you making art in the same style, maybe a little bit rougher, but in the same kind of aesthetic as you are today? Or was it very different?
I mean, it was very different. There's probably some through lines that you could see, but the work right out of school was, I mean, everybody's student work is garbage. I hope it should be. But yeah, it's interesting how that works. But it was almost like psychedelic. Like I was really into the surrealist. Like I liked, and I mean, I guess there's still some surreal elements, but like, Yves Tanguy and Magritte and these guys, like I was one of those people who was trying to be too cool to like Dali, so had to like find some other surrealist and what's her name, Carrington. Anyway, so it was a little bit like I was a pretty good hippie in college, and that probably showed up a little too heavy. But yeah, so I don't know, it was pretty surreal, and then just kind of, I don't know, over the years, like there really is a progression that, I don't know, maybe one day I should try to put some things together, but like, you can see the lineage, but it's evolved a good bit, and it still is, I think, or I hope, like it needs to be.
And while you were sort of getting your feet under you and figuring the art side of your career out, what were you doing like to support yourself? Did you have kind of day work to do, or? Oh
yeah. I mean, like I've always worked. Like I think I got my first job when I was 14 and have had a job until, I don't know. I think I quit my last job in like 2012 or 2013 or something. But up until then, yeah, I always had a job. So we had a family gas station at the beach. And so I ran that for a couple, or maybe actually just right out of school until I moved to Asheville. I was working at a gas station and then moved up here and waited tables, worked in some cabinet shops, and then landed in a picture frame shop. And that was kind of the goal when I got here and realized like I'm going to put some roots down. It was like, well, how do you get a foot in the door of the art scene in Asheville? And Asheville, like for a small town, it's got a great art community. I don't know if you've spent any time here, but I don't know. Where are you in Austin?
Austin, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like Austin, but like, I don't know, a tenth the size maybe. Austin's pretty huge, right?
I mean, it's not huge like Houston huge, but it's a decent sized town.
Yeah. See, we have, I mean, we might have 100,000 people here
Okay.
on a good day. But the art community is solid, and it's all like, that was one reason why I came here. That, and it's gorgeous. But, so I moved up here, bounced around, did the whole thing where, like one benefit of living in North Carolina, like if you're going to deal with all the other things that come with living in the South, like it's at least cheap, and, so you can kind of get by on, whatever work you can find and couches and whatnot. But, so, come to Asheville, and then it's like, well, how do you get to know the art community here? And it just kind of made sense to go work at a frame shop. And just with my own work, it's like I knew how expensive it was to frame stuff. So if it was going to work as a business, I better learn how to do my own framing and basically my own everything. Or at least that's how I justified my, control issues. But the frame shop I worked at had like a chop service, which is like an artist. I don't know. It caters to artists more than just, your normal sort of custom frame shop where you're matching couches to art and that sort of stuff. But so I got in and worked there for probably off and on maybe 10 years. Is that right? Anyway, some years. And that was great.
Were you drawn to like framing because of the experience seeing like your father in woodworking? Was that where that came from?
Yeah, especially with like cabinets, like 90-degree angles are a big deal. But that was a good kind of some sort of marriage of worlds, I guess. But I don't know. My dad was he was very understanding. He's like, here's this good old boy who, for whatever happened, but his kid decided to be an artist. That's like the good old boy's worst nightmare, I think. And, to his credit, like he was as understanding and patient as he could have possibly been. But in a way, I think it was like, well, if I work at a frame shop, he can understand that. Like he can sleep at night a little bit better, maybe. But, and I mean, framing is like, I don't know. I'm glad that I have that skill. And, I'm like last week, I spent the whole week doing picture frames for an artist friend. And like, I needed it. Like sometimes you're banging your head against the canvas and you just need to like go do something with your hands and get dirty for a few days. And
so you're still doing framework even today?
Occasionally, and just for friends. But so basically, left the frame shop. I guess long story short, decided that I need to have some other element besides just relying on paintings to pay the bills and all that. So, and then I found, I don't know, just a niche in the framing market here where it's like, it's a good artist community, but, custom frame shops only can do so much. Like all the molding's pre-finished. You go and you pick from your 3 choices or whatever. And so what I do is I build it from scratch. Like I build all my frames from scratch, even like for my work and for the frames I build for other people. So you can scavenge materials, any, job sites with, hardwood flooring in the dumpster. Like that's amazing material for picture frames, because picture frames they're small, like it doesn't take a ton of material to build a simple frame. So, you can upcycle stuff. But more importantly, though, like with artists in town or the people I do work with when I do, it's like, we can sit down and be like, what exactly do you need? Like, what shape, size, finish, all that. And then I can just build it. Like, I love doing that. And, there might come a time where I do more of that and less of some of the art hustle thing. But
so you must have a lot of like heavy equipment then at your home there.
Just, I have a decent table saw, and then like a planer joiner thing and little chop saw, miter saw. and an underpinner. But I don't know. It's not crazy. You can get away with a lot that was the benefit of like spending all these years in a frame shop too, is like you learn it inside and out. So you kind of know like you can reverse engineer a lot of stuff if you spend a decade doing it. And it's so informal. Like if it ever was like a real business, it would probably be, I don't know,
less attractive.
Yeah. Or just like the inefficiency involved in building everything from scratch would probably become an issue.
So just getting to Asheville, you're still like learning, what you want to do and what you want to become as an artist in your career. How did you first start getting your work into galleries? How did galleries first start noticing what you were doing?
Let's see. Well, I worked with a lot of the artists in town, building frames for them. So that was, at least everybody in town knew me as the guy who would build their picture frames. But there was it was either Lineage Gallery or something. So it was I get Liner and Levine confused all the time, but this is Josh Liner. He was like, he had one of these bigger galleries up in, I don't know, like New York or Philly or somewhere. But anyway, there was Liner's gallery, and then his buddy Bill Thompson did Satellite Gallery in Asheville, and Satellite was in reference to the bigger, kind of more established gallery up north. I might have just butchered that history. Who cares? But but Bill was in town, and I got to know him just because everybody knows everybody in Asheville, and so he had a little gallery, and met him, and did some shows with him, and then kind of did some at like the local arts council and kind of group shows here and there, and I mean it's awesome being in a town like Asheville because, like, the work was probably horrible. I don't want to say it was horrible, but like, I don't know, the support in this community was generous, I'll say. So anyway, did a few shows with Bill, and then we took a trip to Miami Basel, and I don't know, 2010 maybe. It may have been before. It might have been like 2007 or 2008. It was an early Basel, but and we were in this show called the Vanguard Fair, and we were like across the aisle from Andrew and LC from Think Space, when Think Space was tiny before they started doing, Scope and whatever else. So it's just this like, tiny little satellite show at Basel, and so met Andrew and LC there. Like a lot of stuff came from that too. Yeah, I guess that's probably how it started. But
awesome. Very cool. So what led to you, I guess, getting the comfort to give up the job at the store? Like what led to you becoming comfortable with becoming a full-time artist?
Just not thinking about it, like that's really what you got to do. Like it's an irrational decision, however you look at it. And, it's irresponsible. It's all these things. And, like, I mean, I overthink everything. So it usually comes to the point where it's like, well, I gotta let go of some control here and see what happens. And that might be a little glib, I guess. It's true, but it was time. Like for whatever reason, it's like it's time for me to try something else here. And I mean, it's not like I was like some like hedge fund manager or something. I was making like decent money, but not, I was working in a shop. Like I could go work in another shop if it didn't work out. But what I did, it was like, I don't know, I kind of had I made a plan more or less where it's like, I'm going to go take night classes at the community college and learn, the Adobe Creative Suite, because my skills need to get updated. Like I know how to run a darkroom, but like I should probably learn Photoshop. It's kind of realizing that like in my studio now, I have my own like camera setup where I can document the work. I have a large format printer, and so run my own prints and can do all this stuff. because, in part because, I took the time, went and did the night classes, learned how to run software, and it keeps things rolling, I don't know. I've been very fortunate with work being purchased and all that, but like, you got to have some contingencies in place. So, being able to like document work and produce prints, being able to build picture frames for folks if things get slow, like
it's very practical.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pragmatist at heart, but sometimes it's practical to look the other way and do something irrational, or else I don't know. But so that was kind of one, I guess, leap, if you want to call it that, was leaving there. And then another was, I guess a couple of years later, I don't know, like you can't really make a career as a local artist in a town of 90,000 people. I mean, you might be able to, but like the kind of work I'm trying to make, I needed to branch out. So me and a buddy, just kind of got to the point where it's like, well, it's time. Let's take 2 or 3 weeks and just go harass some galleries in LA and San Francisco. And so we did. And like, we had a couple meetings set up, but basically just cold called like 100 or so galleries, like up and down the coast over a couple of weeks. And from that, like I'd known Andrew and Elsie, so I went out and met with them, and like that was great. That got the ball rolling there. But then, got in with well, this wasn't so great, but I got a show with White Walls in San Francisco, and I guess a lot of people can guess how that turned out. But
right, yeah.
But that being said, like I knew his reputation going in, and in my mind, it's like, well, this is a commercial in San Francisco for my work, and like I don't know, it's lots of rites of passage in this business. So that's how I'm looking at it. But yeah, so we did this trip and wound up like it has not stopped since then. Like I guess that was probably 2012 or 2013. I think 2013. Yeah, because Beyond Eden, or I don't know, one of those shows. But yeah, since then it's been nonstop. Like I've been behind ever since. So.
Well, that's a good problem to have for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your particular style and the themes that you incorporate. And one of the things that really stands out to me, and especially the work in the last few years, is the lack of the human form.
Right.
You have these landscapes that are distinctly absent of humans. There's certainly humanities represented in the backgrounds a lot of times with statues and crumbling buildings and stuff like that. But that coupled with the sort of ominous aesthetic in general has me feeling like these scenes are depicting a post-human world, right? Where maybe animals and nature are reclaiming the earth or something like that. Is that the story that you're trying to tell, or is that just my interpretation?
No. I mean, it's clearly there, like that's what it looks like. I don't know. I mean, that's not like, I'm not super interested in that sort of narrative necessarily. Like I see the work as contemporary, like it's present, especially now, like the animals are kind of taken back over and, we're all still here, but it's, so I guess there's a couple of things. It's, well, for one, I've been itching to paint figures again, so that might happen soon, but I don't know, like the animals in my work, they are like, they are narrative, they're characters. It's not scientific illustration. It's, these are, avatars or allegory or whatever. And, and the animals allow you some distance, like the viewer, you don't like, maybe this gets back to the identity thing a little bit, but like any figure is going to have these like attributes about their identity, whether it's, gender, race, whatever, but like, I'm just now thinking about it, but like, that's probably informed by like me spending my whole life trying to like, how do you weasel around this whole conversation? Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, so if you put an animal in, then the viewer can project whatever attributes onto that animal, or you can kind of, use whatever sort of popular culture, whatever associations. And so that's basically been endless, like anything I want to convey, I can do that with an animal. And in my mind, just as effectively as if it were a person, for now anyway. Like that's another thing though, is like the work needs to evolve. Like that's just how it goes. So, there'll be a time when I probably don't paint as many animals, and I don't know. It gets to that thing too, where it's like, I don't know, a few years ago, my wife and I are just like started bird watching because, we're getting that age and being, boring whitish people. But yeah, so it's, but I mean, I've just been like captivated by it, and just the whole, like, I don't know, like I go way into the weeds with some of it, but I like birds, so they're going to start showing up. I spend a lot of time photographing birds, watching birds, and but that's kind of what I was getting at earlier with like art can be this medium to pursue whatever it is that you're interested in. Wildlife, birds, all that has had my attention for the past few years for sure.
Yeah. Do you feel that your, multicultural heritage has, I guess, directly influenced your style in ways? Because I feel elements of both Eastern and Western styles in what you do.
Yeah. And I think there's a little rhythm there too, but, no, I really like Asian landscapes. I like the old vertical, kind of scroll landscapes, and with all the washes, and the way that the mountains kind of radiate like larger the further back you go. It's a sort of, Taoist sort of idea of like no large human presence in the foreground. The mountains get bigger as you go back, and, just interesting sort of use of negative space and whatnot. And then Western art, like, is kind of reversed, where you have this like large figure. And I don't know, I have this thing about like every 4 years around election time, like people get really into like cowboy art and this weird like patriotic thing maybe or something, but or in America, I don't know about other places, but yeah, so I'll go through phases where I like, paint a bunch of horses and buffalo and stuff. And that's the American in me coming out. I don't know.
Well, and you mentioned election and stuff like that. Do world events that are going on at any given point in time affect the work that you're doing? Like, does the geopolitical climate become a factor?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does. It's not ideal, and especially just in the past few years, it's different now than, I don't know, something happened around 2016 that changed things. But, but yeah, it's, like, I don't want to make like Trump art, like I don't want to preach at people. Like, I think that, I don't know, if anything, like in the past few years, I've really kind of come to grips with like how little I know, and just, like things that I never thought in a million years would happen and then continue and happen over and over again. So like, I can be very passionate about something, but like, I don't need to share that because it's probably wrong. And, so in a literal way, I try to like, not explicitly make like, overtly political work, but like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, like as far as, I don't know, just kind of the way I think about art making generally, and what the purpose is, and the difference between like ideology and philosophy. I don't know if it's something you think about much, but I don't know. I guess it's my understanding, like an ideology is like something you believe and want to convince other people to agree with you, or like you're changing the world. And And there's room for that. But the philosophy is more like you're just searching for what's true or what's real or whatever. And like, I don't know. I tend to fall on that side of the fence here. And, like to make work, you just need to be curious and like endlessly curious and able to adapt and evolve. And, like I'm the voyeur here, like I take things in, process them through whatever filter, spit out whatever painting, but like it's ultimately just selfish for my own amusement.
Well, and I know you do tend to incorporate symbols a lot of times in the backgrounds of your work that contribute to a narrative that you're telling with the piece. How much of that, I guess, symbology is planned out from the very beginning versus like fleshed out and figured out as you go?
The more specific stuff will be that'll be in place, I guess, conceptually anyway. I did a piece a few years back that was dealing with Cataloochee Valley. It's in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and we go there every fall to watch the elk rut. But it was this valley where, just your typical like Native American atrocities taking place, and then, kind of tied that with our sort of ongoing struggles with, racial relations, civil rights sort of stuff. So I made this piece that was like, this wall of buildings and industry and whatnot. And it was all elements from whatever civil rights stuff and from, going back to Native American time, like a couple hundred years ago. And, so stuff like that, I'll have this idea where it's like, Cataloochee Valley, like the word means like a valley with steep sides or something. So the idea is like, well, I want this steep wall of, different buildings or places or events that relate. And then I'll read a bunch, listen to a bunch of stuff, like kind of compile a list of things that I want to show that go to it. And then start incorporating them in the piece. But as far as like sketching and like, I don't know where stuff's going to go. I'll just have like a bunch of stuff that I know would fit in the piece.
So their placement and composition is something that you figure out as you're developing it.
A lot of times. Yeah. I mean, I'll have like a general idea. And this varies too. Like sometimes I'll be a little bit more premeditated, but I don't know, it's just boring for one. And also it's like if I work on a painting for 40 hours, even if I want to take 5 hours of just sketching and deciding, like, why not like keep that process open? Because then you have the entire 40 hours to make these decisions, and you can adapt to the piece. And this is just how I work, and it's probably not, I wouldn't advise other people to do it necessarily, but, like the style I work in, like I developed it this way because it does lend itself to, a fear of commitment, I guess. But, cause, like it's like, I'm going to go like background to foreground, usually top to bottom. Things should get bigger as they get closer, but that's about the only requirement. And,
right.
And, you really can, play with it and improvise. And, I don't know, that's how I have to work, I guess.
And has that process evolved over the years in the same way that like your style has evolved?
There was a moment, I guess, that kind of informed it. Was there's this woman named Loy McWhorter, and like she's one of the best artists like I've ever seen in my life. And she's this lady who like lives out in the holler in Western North Carolina mountains. Like, I don't even know if you can find her online, but she does these copperplate etchings that are just absolutely insane. Like, they're devastating and heartbreaking and beautiful and like all these things. And so, this was a frame shop thing. Like, she was doing this museum show, and she came in, got her frames. I met her, and we became friends. And so we basically did a trade. Like I would come out to her studio and trade her like my time for her time. So I would help her with some framing, and she would show me how to do these copperplate etchings. I don't know if all copperplate artists do this, but like what she would do is she would do iterations of the copperplate. So she would do an etching, run a print, and then with that print, she would go in and draw on it with pencil, and then, define what was going to happen next. So it's a design process, very iterative thing. And she would do it like, 10, 15 times, and then have the end result would be this plate that is built up, and I mean, and it's just, it's lovely. I don't know how else to describe it. So I kind of took that and applied it to my work. So like I'll start a painting, I'll get the background in, some kind of loose ideas, and then photograph it, and then print it out, and then draw on the printout, and then I'll decide what's next, and or use Photoshop or some sort of digital thing. But I'll have, sometimes dozens of iterations. And I mean they're very crude, but like of dozens of these images where it's like painting was at this point. I need to just look at it through different eyes. So like get it on a paper and with a pencil, and then, just make some marks, see where you want other elements to be, and develop it that way. I don't know if that made any sense, but
interesting. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I think that's very cool. Do you tend to work on, I mean, it sounds like you almost by necessity have to work on several pieces at once, because that sounds like a very drawn out process.
Yeah. I mean, like there's always, dozens of pieces here in various stages. And yeah, I don't know. It's how it has to be. It's probably something I could be a little better about. Like I have paintings here that like I've just forgotten.
Wow.
I don't remember starting them. I don't remember, like, I don't know. It's gotten to the point where I have to like make notes and just tape them on the back, being like, this is what you're doing here.
Is that difficult just to get back into that headspace?
It can be. But at the same time, like I don't know. I consider myself to be like I'm the difficult one. So I have to kind of trick myself into like, I'll be overthinking something or overworking something. And it's almost better to just forget about it, or like, I don't know, just approach it from a different angle, or set it aside and forget about it. And then, trip over it 6 months later and start it fresh. But that's another benefit of like not, like I don't need it to be anything. Like there's not, like, it's very rare that I have a painting that I need it to be a certain thing. It'll be what it's going to be, or nothing, or get halfway there and, go in a closet for a year or two. And I don't know, like it's, that's why, like, I don't know. I try to do commissions, but I just, it's so backwards. Like I have such a hard time, like making somebody what they want, which is, not very professional of me. I don't know.
The way that you've described your process, that makes a lot of sense. Like it's so organic and so sort of self-defining that it's almost like you can't have something imposed on it,
Yeah. I mean, what it turns into is like, I don't know. Yeah. Yes and no, I guess, in a way. Like sometimes collectors will come to me and be like, I like this piece that you did. Like, let's use that as a jumping off point. And that's usually fine, because I don't know, like that's just, that's a lot more doable. But like starting from nothing is, like working with somebody and starting from nothing. I don't know. It's not always bad, but it's just harder. It's a lot harder, sure. And it takes a lot more time. But that being said, like, I'll keep trying.
So obviously you're a big history buff. We've talked a lot about history throughout the course of this, just some of the things that you're interested in and are excited about. In addition to like history, do you do any other kinds of research for like the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, all sorts. Like it's all very like half-assed, but like that's the benefit of being a painter. But yeah, like I was a lot more focused on history probably 2 or 3 years ago, and to the point where like most of the work had these elements. And I mean, and it's like I still love it and I still make work about it, but like, you know, it evolves with my interest. So, you know, I like philosophy. I don't know, this is a great time to like read Camus and some other existentialists. Like The Plague right now is very relevant, and
Sure.
and I don't know, and it's good for it. It's good for me anyway. It's a good way to I don't know, like just reckon with the world, you know, like how do you make sense of all these things happening? But yeah, so philosophy, history, and then even like some weird physics stuff. Like I listen to audiobooks when I work.
Okay.
And like I used to listen to a lot more politics and news, but with coronavirus, really with Trump, but like coronavirus especially, like you can only take so much of that in your brain before you just have to stop. And
it was overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and it just like painting mad isn't good. You know, like you got to be in a decent frame of mind. And, you know, it's just miserable to be like pissed off all the time. But yeah, so one thing that's come out of the last, you know, couple months, but really last couple years is like moving over to, you know, more long form stuff, less timely stuff. So books or, you know, some podcasts that are more general, but aren't so wrapped up in whatever horse race is happening. And I started some fiction recently too, which is strange. I don't read a ton of fiction, but the Overstory I've been reading.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
Who's the author?
Oh, it's what's his name? Richard Powers.
Okay.
But yeah, I think he just moved down the road here in Smoky Park. But yeah, that and I don't know, there's this other, I don't know, a couple new ones. Zero K, the Don DeLillo. I started reading that, but I don't know.
Interesting. So, I mean, it's interesting that you said the last couple of years have sort of changed in your interest as far as like what you're listening to and paying attention to, because I've also noticed, and maybe it's just me, but in the last couple of years, you've kind of been moving some of your work into different directions or newer directions with dense forests. And I can almost see one in the background. You had some for ThinkSpace a couple of years ago. Yeah. And then even more recently, just a couple weeks ago, a super bright, like, a picturesque house on top of a hill with clouds and stuff, which is very different. Yeah, right there. Very different like approach. Is that an intentional, like, are you really feeling the need to move in new and different directions?
I mean, yeah, but that's always the case. Like I always want my work to be changing or being like, I need to push it some way. And, you know, it's one of those, like, I don't know who said it, but there's this thing about like, if you're, you know, always working like to the best of your ability, then you kind of like by definition, then you shouldn't really know what you're doing. You know, like as soon as you like have something down, that means you're not really like pushing, or for me, sure. You know, like for what I do, if something feels easy, then it's time to, you know, try something else or go another way. And, you know, that goes hand in hand with having just a general curiosity about whatever. Like the house on the hill thing was, you know, we're all kind of on our little islands in the clouds in houses right now. Yeah. So that was just an idea for a painting, like basically. And, but then, you know, stuff like the forest, like that kind of stems from this, like, Martin Heidegger philosophy thing, like the clearing in the forest is, I don't know, this sort of Dasein or whatever. There's some dense, pretentious nonsense there, but like, I don't know. Like I spend a lot of time in the woods and I'm missing that now for sure. But like, you know, clearings in the woods, like there's not much more profound than that, I don't think. So like, that's why I've been painting a lot of forest scenes because I don't know, feels good.
Very cool. So, I mean, you mostly work in oil on canvas, but do you ever have the desire to explore other mediums in the same way that you evolve your style and evolve your
Yeah.
techniques?
Yeah. And, like I've worked a lot in graphite earlier on, and I did a lot of pen and ink work back in the day. But, oils, it's one of those things like I was saying, like I still don't, like I don't know what I'm doing, like by design. And so something like oils, which is like such a rich, like complicated thing. And like if I don't paint a lot, like it goes away fast. So like oils will always be a thing I do very regularly. But the way I paint as far as layers and that sort of stuff goes, like it would make more sense to paint in acrylics. I just haven't, spent the time, put the effort in for that. But I think about that a lot. And that's, Jolene Lai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's
like
amazing.
she does her first layers in acrylics, I believe, and then finishes in oil. And like, I love how her work turns out and like the things she's able to accomplish with that. But, and so like with my stuff, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if I have the like mental bandwidth to like be able to paint that quickly, like I almost need the time for oils to dry. Like if it was, I don't know. Yeah. I have to put up a lot of these sort of, guardrails to prevent myself from ruining all these paintings. So
what is your typical like studio practice like on a normal day?
Normal day I get up, I mean it varies, but I'll get up sometime between like 5 and 7 in the morning and come in here, read for a while, have some like an hour of like quiet basically. So it's reading or writing or some sort of sitting practice thing. And then, go till dinner time. And it varies, but like I wake up and, and I just go. And then, recently, my wife and I figured out a way to like 7:00 comes around, like stop, cook dinner, watch a movie or something, like be a grown up, that sort of thing. And that's been great. So that helps.
Was that not always the case? Is that something you struggled with before?
It used to just be like wake up, work, go to sleep. Now it's like wake up, work, cook dinner, go to sleep. So, there's another part in there, but, and, it's like, it's probably, I say this all the time, but it's not sustainable. Like, I think most artists work too much, but, it's not even just too much, but like the work suffers for the workaholism isn't good for like the more creative side of painting. But, I don't know. And this gets back to the framing thing where it's like, I can see a time where I'll do more woodworking of whatever sort, not because the work, it would make the paintings better, like if I could, just have one or two shows a year instead of like 20 or whatever. And like, just, make bigger paintings slower and have like something else to do or whatever to keep the lights on.
Do you take weekends off?
No. I think I took one like 10 years ago, maybe. No, I don't know. Like I hike. And, so normally when all our parks are open and like our national forest is closed. I don't know how you close a national forest, but usually this time of year I'm out, 2 mornings a week where like me and the dog we'll leave at 5 in the morning and I can be back in the studio by 1 and have, a good hike or some good time in. And then, and as far as like reference work goes, like I carry a camera everywhere I go. And so in a way, like everywhere I go is kind of a studio practice too. Like, you never can tell when you're going to see, whatever bird or anything that just looks right. So like the one kind of unifying thing in my work is like all of it looks like North Carolina, I think, in a way. And,
And I mean, you've adjusted your work-life balance, obviously. Like you mentioned, you're now taking time in the evenings to wind down and have dinner and relax a bit. Are you happy with your work-life balance now, or do you feel like it still needs adjustment?
I mean, both, I guess. Like I'm good, I'm ridiculously fortunate to be able to do this. So like to be anything other than happy with it doesn't strike me as reasonable. But at the same time, like, yeah, like there's all like nothing's stagnant, like,
Sure.
and yeah, the work really does change with routines, so like, I don't know. It's right now it's springtime. So like birds are a lot more active. So like I'll probably take an hour or two a day and set up, and like I have a setup out back with a bird feeding station with
nice.
certain branches set, but it's like set up to photograph and sketch and observe them. And so, this for the last month and maybe the next month, like it'll be an hour of my studio time, like watching birds. Like,
nice.
What a ridiculously good job that is. But like, and so it varies like during the year, and then also just going forward too.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's talk about what you got coming up. And if I recall correctly, when we were first talking about doing this show like the end of last year, you were saying that you had been working on a show that was coming up. Has that been affected by recent events at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff's been shuffled around. For the most part, like my work is stayed on course. I had a show with a band in Denver. So that was scheduled, I think initially, it may have been opening like yesterday initially or something, but it's, we've backed that up to July.
Okay.
So there was a solo there that got moved, but it's still like, I'm still working on the, that house painting there. We'll probably go to it.
Nice.
And then, there's really just stuff's gone online only, like most of these group shows have been, which, yeah, I don't know. I'm still figuring out what I think about that. But, and what else is coming up? Yeah, so that's the big one. And then I have a few, let's see, I have something with Antler and Talon in the fall, and then in January I'm doing another solo with Haven.
Okay. Nice.
And I think John Ching is showing there too, which will be cool. I really like his work. I've never met him, but I don't know, his stuff's pretty nice.
Yeah, he's amazing. Very cool. So the show in July at a Bend, are you still, you said you're still working on it? Do you know what like the general theme's going to be?
I mean, just kind of what my theme, so I think, I think it's called Old Growth.
Okay.
And, it kind of goes with this. Like, I don't know. I have a little bit of fascination with old growth forest and, that sort of stuff. And, but then it also is, I think the term old growth can be used for a lot of stuff now, especially now that we're like, I don't know, a lot of this, climate change, pandemic stuff seems like we're reaping what we've sowed, sort of. So like old growth and the idea of like, the shit's been growing for a while, and we might, I don't know. So that's kind of broad strokes, like where that's coming from.
Do you know how many pieces you're going to have?
It'll probably be like 12 or 13. I don't know. Should probably check my emails and see what I told Dave. But, so it's probably around, I mean, it's like initially it was the small room. So, I think that's 10 to 12 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Like those are kind of the shows that, I don't know, those like the smaller solos, I guess, where you're doing a dozen or so pieces, seems to suit pretty well and lets me be, lets me kind of spread it out some and try out new places. I don't know.
For that size of a show, how long do you typically spend on the works?
I mean, it depends. It's funny because it's like, in a way, the less time, the better, because like it gets back to that, like the paintings that are overworked are, in my mind, like conspicuously overworked. And like the ones that work and they just flow, like you're in a good space, you hit it in stride. Like those are the better paintings in my mind. And so ideally you knock it out, like you might have to sit around and do nothing for 3 months and then wait on that 1 month like thing. But yeah, so that being said, like it varies. I don't know. I'm not always this like flippant or whatever about work practice stuff, but like these days, like that's kind of where I'm at now. Like it's kind of evolved to this point where like it was a lot more regimented even maybe a year or two ago, where it's like X amount of paintings are going to take this much time and I'm going to stick to it. But then, you just go through cycles where like you gotta let some stuff go occasionally, or like leave some room for work to breathe. And
yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense to kind of let it build and grow in its own pace.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you shouldn't like fighting a painting is never a good thing, and I have plenty. Like that's when they go to the closet, But
well, tell people where they can find you online.
I guess just Instagram, and I have a website, brianmashburnart.com, and Instagram. I have a Facebook, but I can't stand Facebook, so I mean, I know I should do better, but like it's just I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if it could just be like, here's 20 cool things to do with a rubber band, that'd be great. But like, I don't want to hear other people's thoughts on, politics, whatnot, but I don't know. So yeah, Instagram and my website are probably the best couple. And then, I don't know, like I've some galleries that I've got good relationships with, like ThinkSpace and Haven and Antler and Arch Enemy, Binart, these fellas, but kind of usual suspects.
Awesome. Great. Well, last question, and this is something I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Yeah, for this question. So I don't know. I kind of wanted to rep some Asheville folks, because like we have some amazing artists here. And there's a couple people like in town who have kind of snuck out, like Ruben Negron and Frank Lombardo, like they show here and there. And but I don't know. So I'm gonna say 3 people, but Margaret Curtis is like seriously an amazing painter. Folks should check her out, but like she'd be an interesting person to talk to. Julian Davis, he's shown with Evoke in Santa Fe, I think, with a couple folks that you've probably heard of, and then Galen Bernard. So those are 3 Asheville artists. They're all very different, but yeah, they'd all be pretty interesting folks to talk to, I think.
Awesome. Well, I will look them up, and yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate it. And Brian, thank you so much for coming on today, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it for sure.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brian. One of the things that I found most interesting while talking to him was the value that he attributed to the interdisciplinary environment he had in college, and how it not only broadened his perspective on the world and made him a generally more well-rounded person, but it also fed into his art making. And you could even hear it throughout our chat, just how important it's been to him to have these exterior interests to draw inspiration from and fuel his artistic pursuits. I'm excited to see his new body of work come together for the solo show in July. That show is called Old Growth, and it opens on July 1st at Abend Gallery in Denver. It looks like it's going to be an amazing exhibition. So thanks again to Brian for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any suggestions for the show, or if there's a guest you want me to try and have on. I'd love to hear any feedback you might have for me. You can contact me through my website at artaffairespodcast.com. And like I said at the front of the show, you can go there to check out any previous episodes. You can also find the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. And last but not least, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I'd be super grateful if you took a moment to write a review for the show. It really just takes a second, and it helps out so much, if you don't mind. So until next time, be good to yourself, and be good to each other.